Hi guys! In this lesson, we're going to brainstorm some ideas and try and find our definitive designs for our customized skulls. You might be wondering, what exactly is a brainstorm? A brainstorm is a process of investigation where we make lots of sketches of something we want to draw. Some we might like, some not. But when we do many, we can then make a selection of the ones we like the most or some of the elements that stand out to us. Later on, we can continue working on what we've selected by adding more ideas, or we can keep what we've chosen as it is. It all depends on what you're looking for in your design. Okay, so let's see how this works. Before anything else, create a new layer where we'll draw our sketches. To sketch, I'm using a brush that I modified previously to obtain a stroke similar to a pencil. To do this, I chose brush number 36, and I modified its properties to the ones that I'll show you here on the screen. I lowered the opacity, and I gave it a broken and rough finish to look more like a pencil. Copy these properties if you like, or modify them to get whatever look you want. Using the anatomy we learned in the previous lesson, we're going to draw our skulls, but in our own style. My style is more cartoon-like, so that's how I'm going to draw them. Shape your skulls considering all the bones you learned before. Don't make them up. In this type of drawing, it's important to define all the elements really well, even though you can then simplify them in 2 or 3 lines. The key is making sure the volumes and main structures can be understood so that anyone who sees it recognizes it as a skull. This is very important. Remember that the key elements that need to be visible are the cranium, the cheekbone, the eye sockets, the zygomatic arch, and the teeth. Of course, you could draw the mandible, but I rarely do. The mandible is a piece that fits in. It's attached via muscles and tendons, so when these don't exist, it separates from the rest of the skull. That's why skulls are often represented without the lower jawbone. But add it or not, it's really up to you. Something to bear in mind, I think, is the expressiveness of your drawing when you're doing a cartoon style. For a skull, we could show this through the eye sockets, for example. You could make them more open or closed, wider or fallen. You'll see how the effect the skull has changes, and how ironically it comes to life. I recommend you try adding different elements to decorate your drawing. So I'm adding a helmet to my skull, like the one a skater would wear, just to add a touch of humour. But you could add anything you like: tattoos, horns, hair, anything. Although anything you're not sure how to draw, make sure you reference it by looking for photos or real objects. Respect the volumes and spaces of that element in relation to your skull. Everything should be credible and placed correctly in the drawing so the viewer believes it. Sometimes it's helpful to use random lines to find new directions or shapes that might be attractive or interesting. If you do this, do it on another layer that you can erase later. Then, if you don't like the results, you can delete the layer and keep the drawing you have underneath. When you draw, bear in mind the perspective. Remember, when we studied the skull, we placed it in a cube and all the elements worked in that space, so you still need to be aware of that. No matter what perspective your skull is in, it needs to work. The elements need to be understandable and not deformed or misshaped, unless that was your intention. If you want to add strange shapes or deformities, then your intention needs to be clear. Let's say that the cheeks came out a little weird because of an error in perspective. It will be obvious that this wasn't on purpose. If you're struggling with this, draw a cube first and place the skull inside. You could also look for references of skulls from different perspectives and positions and use those as a guide. Just make things as easy as possible for yourself. When your layer is full, create a new one if you need, and carry on sketching more ideas. I know that at first you might want all your sketches to work and look cool, because that happens to me all the time. But I really wouldn't worry about that at this stage. We're only trying to get 1 or 2 good ideas out of all of this. There'll be designs that you love or details you like that you can use by mixing with other designs. Create as many layers as you like and sketch until you run out of ideas. I also like the effect of extremely deforming the shapes. Look at the skulls I'm drawing now. Some of them are completely deformed. They're wide, long, flat. Imagine you're working with a piece of plasticine that you can squash and stretch. It can be fun to try out different shapes like this. Very big eyes or very small eyes, the nasal cavity higher or lower, massive teeth or tiny teeth. Anything works really, as long as you respect the different elements of the skull. Just give it a go. If you don't like something, that's okay. You're just experimenting. If you don't know how to do something like this, or you're not sure what style you want to give your drawings, don't worry. Look for artists that you like and see how they draw this type of thing. Getting ideas from other artists is a great way to learn. You'll also get tricks from some or a very personal or interesting style from others. All artists use other artists as reference. In the end, art is as old as the human race, and humans learn from one another and experiment with new things. For example, by taking 2 artistic references and mixing them, we already have a new style. You can mix very simple designs and more complex ones to experiment with the style. That way, you'll see which ones interest you more. Sometimes less is more, as they say, and 4 simple lines might work better than a very detailed drawing. You just need to try out both. Don't be shy with your ideas. You can make your skull look like whatever you want to. I've drawn a hamburger skull because why not? I mean, everything is valid. You could make an ice cream skull or even a cell phone. Just use your imagination. So, when you've finished, arrange your drawings on the canvas. Now, with a red brush, I'll tick all the ideas I like and I'll put a cross next to the ones that I don't. If I'm not sure, I'll put a question mark. As I want to draw 4 skulls, I'll compare the designs with each other until I find the 4 I like the most. I'll duplicate the layer to save all the previous designs and I'll erase the ones I don't like from the duplicated layer until I end up with the ones I want to work on. And I'll arrange these on the canvas. Now lower the opacity of the sketch layer and create a new layer on top to carry on drawing and detail the skulls. This will now be the definitive drawing before the line art, so make sure the volumes and structures are well defined so you don't have any problems later. I'll keep the same brush, but I might increase the opacity so I can see the stroke more clearly. As you can see, I'm adding more structure to all the drawings. Every element needs the correct space, volume, and perspective so it can work. If you don't like something, you can always just erase it and redraw it. But whatever you do, make sure you define everything properly. If you need to create another layer to continue doing this, that's fine. Remember how all the bones are placed anatomically in the skull so all your lines function correctly. There might be some shapes that can be explained with a few simple lines and don't need much detail. You'll see yourself if your drawing makes sense. If you still have doubts, you can always ask a third person if they can see what's wrong with the drawing. It's always good to receive criticism, and if it's constructive, it will always help to improve your skills. Try to apply your own personal style to the drawing so you can identify with it. I'm sure that you often recognize the work of your favorite artist as soon as you see it. And that's something you should aim for in your own work. Try and put your stamp on your drawing. Small details are the difference between one style and another. Great, so the designs are ready. I love this phase. I think it's the most creative in the process. We can experiment and get to know our strengths and weaknesses when drawing. So in the next lesson, we'll move on to the line art. I'll see you there.